Hello and welcome back to Why Geopolitics Matter, the podcast. In this week's episode, we'll cover the latest in the Somaliland and Israel relationship, the result of the Colombian elections, what that means internationally, and the new Chinese sanctions on tech companies from the US. So let's get into it. Before we go into the main topics, let's talk about the World Cup because we have been gotten many interesting trends and stories. So which ones have been your favorites?
I have to say mine was the Scottish people. They've been amazing. Drinking, I think, the entire beer reserve of Boston, plus throwing cones on top of statues. That was just like pure Scottish sports, and that was just amazing.
I could say that's a national achievement and everyone should clap at themselves in Scotland.
Yeah, and Boston's a big drinking city. They've got Sam Adams, which is a big deal. It was funny. There was one report that I saw that the only beer that was left was Bud Light, which is, the correct choice. But my favorite thing about the World Cup so far has been the Norwegian fans with their rowing. Everybody is talking about their rowing, and I love it so much. And not only they did it in Parliament, and it was pretty interesting on Trevor Noah's show. He was doing it in his studio, and he started singing the Queen song, the "Buddy You're a Bad," so along with the rowing. So I don't know. It's fun to get excited about that, especially since Norway is doing well. I know they lost to France, but I'm just saying they're still in it. They didn't have Harlan on the field that day, so they knew it's strategic that they lost.
No, and even the different branch of the army did it. So that's just amazing to see that.
Yeah, I love it so much. It's so funny.
Yeah. For me, it was the football fan who stays completely still with his arm raised in the air during the whole match. He is from the DRC, from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's just not staying still for fun, but it has more meaning to it, which is why for me it was more interesting, because he's actually trying to represent the first prime minister after the DRC became independent from the Belgian colonialism. And he was known as a symbol of independence and anti-colonial movement. Even Malcolm X talked about him and described him as like the greatest black man who ever walked in Africa. It's amazing how the stadiums become a place to tell each country's stories, and it's more than just football, but like national identity. Now let's get into our main topics for this podcast. So Antoine, can you tell us what's happening? What's the latest between Somaliland and Israel?
Yes, of course. So a recent information shared by the Middle East Eye says that a senior Somali official claimed that Israel has deployed around 50 soldiers in Somaliland, though Israel has denied the allegation. So what matters most, though, is the broader trend. Israel and Somaliland have clearly deepened their relationship since Israel formally recognized Somaliland in late 2025. And Reuters reported that recognition and later reporting showed growing diplomatic and security ties, including Somaliland's embassy opening in Jerusalem. So why does this matter? Well, because Somaliland sits in one of the most sensitive strategic zones in the world, near the Gulf of Aden and the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. Any Israeli presence there would have an obvious implication for the Red Sea security, surveillance, and the wider confrontation with Iran-linked actors. First, we can here directly think of the Houthi threat in Yemen, which targets directly Israeli or Israeli-linked ships in the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. As I said, the information has to be taken as a rumor for now, as it has been denied by both Israeli and Somaliland's governments. Nonetheless, Berbera Airport on Somaliland's coast saw construction work at the end of 2025. An investigation by the journal Le Monde found that the UAE were overseeing the project on behalf of both Israel and the United States. So the project seemed to grant the airport greater capabilities, supposedly for military purposes, which would make sense regarding the strategic importance of the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. In the meantime, the reaction has been sharp. Somalia says any such arrangement violates its sovereignty. The Houthis have warned the Israeli activity in Somaliland could make it a target. So the real story is not just whether Israeli troops are already there, as the ties between both countries have been growing since the end of 2025. It is that Somaliland has become a new node in the regional contest over the Red Sea, recognition politics, and security competition in the Horn of Africa. So, yeah, it's a pretty complex situation. Also, knowing that Israel is the only country that is officially recognizing Somaliland.
It's interesting because the strategic reasoning regarding the Houthis is probably definitely a very good reason for Israel, since they have been threatened by the Houthis. They've got Iran on the other side. The proxy group is definitely a threat in the region. So it's important for Israel to start placing themselves in the region with allies. Another thing that I also read was that the AP was reporting that this is a possible solution for Israel to help Gazans move out of the Gaza Strip, which is something that's not ideal. I mean, ethnic cleansing is probably one of the worst things that they could be trying to do next. And by removing the Gazans and moving them to Somaliland, stating that they can move there and have economic prosperity and to build up the region, because of course Somaliland wants to build up their economy as well. But having that relationship with Israel and getting more people in their workforce and people who want to build things in Somaliland, these are people that don't want to move their homeland. So it's really interesting that their position from Israel, especially considering they're not wanting to recognize the Palestinian state, but they're willing to recognize Somaliland. That whole balance is kind of an awkward thing for Israel and making them look like they're not practicing what they preach. So the trustworthiness of it is definitely an issue as well.
Yeah, Somaliland seemed to be very open and willing to receive migration. There were some statements from this refugee institution in Somaliland saying that if Palestinians willingly wanted to come to Somaliland, they would have no problem. And the moment that they signed recognition, they received so much backlash because of it in like several levels, but also specifically in that one, that they had to put out a statement saying that they will not sign any agreement on that regard. But I think is going to be part of the, let's say, silent agreement between Israel and Somaliland as to why Israel decided to recognize Somaliland. So I think that eventually they will be again open to receive migration from Palestinians, which could be destabilizing for Somaliland, for the population. And also it's going to put more pressure diplomatically in the region if they start receiving that kind of migration, aside from the other political pressure that they already have coming from like Turkey, since they are one of the closest security allies of Somalia. Then we have Egypt, who views things in the Horn of Africa from their frictions with Ethiopia, because Ethiopia has closer relationships to Somaliland because of their own strategic reasons, because they need access to a port, they need access to the sea. Then we have the UAE investing a lot in Somaliland. So Saudi Arabia will also keep an eye on this. So I think that overall, this recognition and the relationship between Somaliland and Israel is going to bring a lot of visibility for Somaliland compared to before. But I don't think they're going to achieve what they wanted by being recognized by Israel, which is to open the door and be more inviting of other countries to come and also recognize Somaliland. I think the opposite will happen, that countries will be more reluctant to recognize them.
Yeah, coming from such a controversial country at the moment, it's probably politically not like the easiest decision to make, but they've been a very stable government since the 90s. They've had transitions of power. They've had elections. It's a lot more stable than it is in Somalia. So their government is a lot more stable. And it's coming from Israel is controversial. When the United States decided to try to pass a bill about recognizing Somaliland, it wasn't so controversial, and plus it would be a major superpower behind you, giving you that recognition. It's just that balance is got to be watched for by the government of Somaliland, like you said. Yeah, it's just you have to be very careful to thread that needle.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I think also like a dangerousness in the fact that Somaliland would be recognized at all costs internationally. So that put pressure on the entire region. As you said, Egypt is very much aware of what's going on and is very much worried as well about what's going on. I think so far on the international scene, everyone is advocating or at least supporting the unity of Somalia, so definitely not recognizing Somaliland. And that's why we see like this trio between the UAE, Israel, and the USA that are actually advocating a bit more for Somaliland. So it would be interesting to see where this would go. If it would only be, let's say, a sole military cooperation. So far, we've seen clear rapprochement between Israel and Somaliland regarding security. That would make sense regarding the Houthis, but if it goes further, there would be potentially an escalation. So it's definitely something that we'll have to watch in the future.
Yeah. It's okay. Now let's move on to our next topic, which is the result of the Colombian elections. So last Sunday was the second round of votings. After a very polarized campaign, Colombians elected Abelardo de la Espriella as the country's next president, who will take office in August. He won over the left-wing candidate Ivan Cepeda by less than 1 percentage point, which is one of the closest presidential elections results in the history of the country. So domestically, that means that the country will remain very divided, because half of the population were voting for a very different political project, and the Congress will be fragmented as well. So that means that implementing the government plans will be more difficult. However, from a geopolitical perspective, the biggest takeaway is that Colombia will completely change or redefine its position in the international system. Because over the past 4 years with President Gustavo Petro, still President Gustavo Petro, there was a more autonomous foreign policy. He strengthened relations with China by joining the Belt and Road Initiative. He restored relations with Venezuela back when Maduro was still in power. He broke relations completely with Israel. He suspended coal exports to Israel, which was a very important income for Colombia as well. So that was very significant. He stopped purchases of Israeli military equipment and intelligence and cooperation in general. So with the La Espriella, this is going to take a 180-degree turn. So his administration is going to make security the foundation of Colombia's foreign policy. And that's going to start with the United States, because he promised to rebuild relations with Washington and join Trump's national security approach. And the first step that he's going to take is to join the Shield of the Americas, which is a US-led regional security initiative, which is designed to strengthen collaboration, intelligence sharing, and in general, military cooperation against transnational criminal organizations in Latin America. That shift is also going to affect directly our neighbors, particularly Venezuela, because De La Espriella has a stronger stance regarding the presence of Colombians' armed groups or criminal groups that operate also from Venezuela, because they have used the border and the Venezuelan territory as safe havens, making Venezuela naturally one of the most important security concerns for Colombia. But it's very interesting because He has also described Venezuela as an important economic opportunity. He sees the country as such because from his perspective, since Venezuela economically they're trying to rebuild the system, that could be an opportunity for Colombia to be the main supplier of services and goods. So he's going to try to establish more economic relations with Venezuela, but in a way that is not going to be too direct also, because diplomatically he wants to maintain relations with Venezuela through the United States and not directly with the current government until there is official like democratic elections the way he sees it. So for now he wants to, since he's aligning with the US, he wants to align completely and also like do the U-turn that way. Another significant change concerns Colombia's relationship with Israel. So as I said before, under Petro, Colombia was one of the biggest critics of Israel in Latin America. But de la Espriella said that those decisions that he made, that Petro made during his government, will be reversed, meaning that we're going to restore diplomatic relations with them. We're going to reopen Colombia's embassy in Israel, and we are going to resume close cooperation on defense. Colombian coal exports are going to resume as well. And in general, this reflects Colombia's new, broader stance internationally after 4 years of a very different foreign policy. He's also going to take a more aggressive campaign against criminal organizations, which initially most likely will increase violence, while the country will be still polarized. So this is going to slow down any attempts to implement major reforms. But we can expect in terms of security an escalation.
It's really interesting because he's really El Tigre. That's his nickname, right?
El Tigre, yeah.
Yeah. He's really taking the same playbook as Bukele in El Salvador. I think that's a really interesting way that he's going, especially with, I guess it would be successful he has been in cracking down. And it's like you said, he did start with violence by arresting everybody in the country, and but some people have been also speculating that he wants to keep following El Salvador's path by building mega prisons in the jungle. And if they're going to start taking deportations from the United States that El Salvador did, by building that relationship up with Trump and being endorsed by Trump was probably a big sell for him as well. So it's interesting that he wants that closer relationship, and it feels like he's following the exact same playbook. So going forward, I guess if we look at what is happening in El Salvador, he could basically follow the same line and try to like make it happen for Colombia, which doesn't sound great. Maybe he should stay away from crypto, but it's also not a great path. It doesn't engender any kind of democratic values or good processes, and it would be interesting to see how all this plays out.
Yeah, what I see the most regarding security again is that it wouldn't surprise me if Trump would take the advantage of this election to reinforce its sexual war on the cartels. Recently, there was again some people killed by the U.S. military in the sea regarding cartels and drug trafficking. So the path on security seems to be rather in favor of Trump's war on cartels.
Yeah, that's undeniably convenient for the US to step up, to have another point of where to launch their operations in the broader region. And it's also going to be more pressure for Venezuela because having a very close ally of the US right next to your door, that will change the behavior or the approach that you have. So yeah, overall it's going to be a very big change for Colombia, for our foreign policy. And we'll see how everything develops. Let's continue with our next topic, which is the new set of sanctions from China on big tech companies from the US. So, Meredith, tell us what's happening.
Earlier this month, the Pentagon has added several Chinese businesses, specifically the tech giant Alibaba and the electric car maker BYD and a search engine Baidu, to its list of Chinese military companies, preventing them from getting U.S. defense contracts. And in retaliation, China announced earlier this week that they are sanctioning 10 American military-related companies in response to the recent U.S. move that barred the leading tech companies from defense contracts. And so Chinese companies would be blocked from exporting dual-use items to the 10 companies. And these do include military drone makers, and some involved are rare earth mining. The dual use refers to goods that can be military as well as non-military. So this could be anything from regular tech to big military tech. Rare earths are a hot topic of conversation, as there has been little progress on rare earth supplies between the United States and China. At the same time, the G7 discussed this issue, pledging to reduce their dependence on any supplier, calling for no more than 60% of rare earth imports to come from one country by 2030. It's also important to note that the world relies on China for about 90% of its supply of so-called light rare earths, which are used in oil refining, glass polishing, and magnet production. Beijing is wielding its power over rare earths as a trade weapon to impose strict export controls and causing production disruptions globally, specifically on cars, robots, and military equipment and other products. Using their power over rare earths is a big step up for China, because they haven't been using sanctions in an economic sense, but they're using it to disrupt the supply chain globally. So this is a really interesting tactic to use as a sanctioning mechanism. Usually it's more of barring people from certain parts of the financial system, but using the supply chain to their advantage, because they do control much of the rare earths in Latin America and Africa. So being able to use this against bigger countries like the United States and a lot of industrialized countries like the G7, this is something that China is finally being able to say, look at me, I can do this too. So they've been building up all these relationships and getting the access to all of these rare earths. Is now they're flipping the script and saying, we can sanction you now. Like, you've got to come talk to us. We're important to talk to now.
What is important as well on the American side is that the US have been building up their capacity to extract, or at least reinforce their diplomatic ties with countries extracting rare earth. We've seen that in Nigeria and in Democratic Republic of Congo as well. They've been more and more involved, diplomatically speaking, with these countries to obtain concessions or place actually their companies down in these countries. So it would be interesting as well to see how the US would how that would impact the relationship between the US and other G7 countries.
For me, the biggest takeaway is that this is in the middle of a broader tendency of trying to develop the most advanced military, and the initial decision from the US has the intention of slowing down a little bit that advancement, because in China they have this national strategy of trying to dissolve the barriers or divisions between the civil and academic realms and the military. So any technological advancement that comes up from any private company, maybe telecommunications, will automatically have the rights to be implemented in the military, which is very funny, because this is exactly what the US is trying to do with AI companies as well, like Anthropic, who are also trying to resist the use of their AI into their military. So for the Chinese, it's going to be easier to do that compared to the US. And this decision of adding them to the list is just, again, one way of trying to slow down their investment they could get to develop in the technological area.
What is interesting as well is that they are preventing China from doing more, especially participating in the American defense. But in the same time, the American industrial complex is not slowing down, but reaching its limits. We've seen it with the AUKUS agreement, where they are not going to be able to sustain all the deliveries for the US Navy. So I'm actually wondering where the US will be able to actually fully be able to keep China out, and for how long they will be able to do that.
Right. And they do want to up the budget for defense in the United States. I think he wants to take it up to 1.5 trillion for the next budget. And that is interesting because there does need to be investment in actual military capacity, developing new systems. So it's really difficult for the US to fall behind with China. And so they want to kind of put them in a stranglehold to make sure that they're not moving too far ahead of them, to use the sanctions to their ability. But also China is able to strike back now by saying, you know what, we are part of the system, we're part of the global supply, we know what's going to be needed in order for you to develop military technology. So we're going to take advantage of that situation and try to hamper you back. So it is an interesting situation that both countries have put themselves in, that they need to develop, but they also need the materials for it.
If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe and follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. This episode will be available on Monday, so stay tuned for more Why Geopolitics Matter.
For more articles on why geopolitics matters, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at whygeopoliticsmatter.com.